Good morning, everyone. Warm welcome from SAP to the session on Optimize SAP Run Costs with Hyperscalers and Futureproof Your S4HANA Roadmap. My name is Rajiv Gurnani. I'm a Vice President of Platform and Technology here at SAP, and I would like to extend a warm welcome again to this session. We have a great agenda laid out for you, and we really appreciate you joining this morning for the session. The agenda would start with Rocky Subramaniam, Managing Director, Midwest, talking about the cloud transformation and change in deployment. That will be followed up with the journey of Allison Transmission and their experiences on driving the motivation and deployment of their SAP landscape onto SAP Cloud, and their experiences on change in deployment, followed by the approach they took with respect to migrating the systems to the cloud. We will also talk a little bit about other possibilities with respect to lift and shift or greenfield migration projects and the nuances that go into it. And last but not the least, we will cover it up with the Q&A and the possibilities around how you can engage with SAP on this journey. We have a great set of speakers here. As I said, Rocky will open it up. I will cover a few minutes around the session on the journey of cloud migration and how customers have leveraged the financial approaches to optimize their costs, followed by Eddie and Brendan from Allison taking most of the time to talk about their experience and journey, the drivers they had, and last but not the least, Dave and Praveen from Gansys to talk about the migration approach. Without further ado, I will pass it on to Rocky Subramaniam to talk about the cloud transformation journeys with SAP customers.
Great. Thanks, Rajiv. Good morning, everybody. I also want to extend a very warm welcome to everybody on this very exciting discussion today. This is a topic that is top of mind for a lot of our SAP customers. So as Rajiv said, my name is Rocky Subramanian, and I'm the Managing Director for SAP's Midwest region. Our Midwest region is home to some of our most successful customers in the world, and including the top recognizable brands around the globe. So while I'm responsible for managing the P&L for the region across the whole portfolio, my prime directive is really helping my customers drive business outcomes they seek every day. So the topic of today's discussion is really on how do organizations that are existing SAP ERP customers as well as new S4 customers quickly take advantage of the latest innovations that SAP's multi-billion-dollar R&D investments are delivering today. So, as we all know, the pandemic has had a significant impact, on our business and how we approach our own respective customers and our employees too. So one consistent theme that is emerging is the acceleration of move to the cloud for a lot of your systems. That includes moving SAP investments onto a cloud environment. And most of the acceleration that we are seeing is the move to a hyperscaler-based environment. Existing customers like you are asking how to transition their legacy systems to the cloud effectively while either simultaneously upgrading to the SAP S4HANA, or if you are not ready to do that, laying the right foundation so when you are able to move to S4, you have a well-defined setup to move to that roadmap. So new customers, on the other hand, are actually starting directly with S4 on the cloud. The feedback I'm getting from customers are, there are widely differing points of view, and it comes from different consultants, there are system integrators, there's hyperscalers. My goal today, with some of the great speakers we have, is to assure you that you can have the best of all the options out there. You don't have to compromise. You can continue to have SAP as your single go-to, leveraging our strengths, our industry best practices, the innovation that we have, and all of the assets and the knowledge that you accumulated as part of your journey within SAP. You can have all of that while consuming the strengths of the hyperscaler of your choice. You don't have to compromise there, as well as leverage the experience from a strong ecosystem of SI partners. So that's that's really the goal today, is to kind of share with you, how SAP is jumping in so that we can have a seat at the table, be responsible, and be part of your journey with SAP, making sure that we're leveraging the best of all of the options that are out there, okay? And we'll help drive clarity, a prescriptive set of, recommendations, and our goal is to do that through our managed cloud model that allows you to leverage the hyperscaler infrastructure, the skills of the SI partners, while making sure that SAP remains front and center for delivering the experience that you as our customers seek. And this is our single outcome model that essentially takes all of the SAP investments and the skills that you have and shifts it into the cloud. So some of the themes that you'll hear today is, transformation of IT operations is caused by a shift in focus away from infrastructure maintenance towards the application layer. And this as customers of ours, you want flexibility when it moves to the cloud. And you do not want any sort of a lock into a particular vendor or partner, or frankly, time constraints. Our customers want SAP roadmap to be best in class with business agility and a cloud deployment scalability that comes with it. The other reason why CFOs and other leaders within our customers and CEOs are looking for this type of a model is because it's adaptive, it's scalable, and it allows you to leverage and match the demands of the rapidly changing business model that you have as a customer. Tapping into a strategic partner to manage the SAP technical stack. SAP knows SAP best. Our goal is to be that single face to you. We don't want you to have to deal with, calling, depending on the issue, calling a hyperscaler, or calling an SI, calling SAP support. We want to be that single face so we can make that experience as seamless and simple for you. So how do you leverage the strength of hyperscalers in this space? How do we leverage the innovations? That's what you're going to hear about. And who better to tell the story than one of our marquee long-term customers, Allison Transmission. So Eddie and Brandon have leveraged this model to drive much success at Allison. And I really appreciate them taking the time to tell their story. We also have their SI partner, Gyansys, to share how they successfully helped Allison on this journey. So it's really powerful, and you'll get to see this in action on how SAP is partnered with Allison and Gyansys to deliver that outcome that Allison set out to deliver to their board of directors and to their customers. And I want to thank them again for their support and making the time to share the story. But before I transition to them, I'd like to bring back Rajiv, who heads up SAP's platform and technology, to give you a quick grounding on this new approach. So thank you, and look forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Rocky.
Rajiv.
So basically, in summary, what Rocky said, I'll double-click a little bit on that. So the single outcome model that many customers have requested SAP is more around multiple providers do multiple things for the environments today, especially the SAP environments. There is an application managed services provider looking at the systems on a daily basis and patching and upgrading them. There is an infrastructure hosting provider and or infrastructure management team looking at the hardware and upgrades and associated nuts and bolts around how to maintain the environment. And then the third and the biggest puzzle in the quiz is around the IT adoption roadmap for future SAP software. And the unpredictability of costs around these three topics is what drives concerns for a CIO or a CXO to make decisions to adopt the innovations that SAP and other companies are announcing. And this is where generally in an on-prem scenario, licensing and support models are black and white clear because they're documented for a long-term contract, but all the other operational aspects around the infrastructure, around the operations, around many other aspects are unknown and unpredictable. And our single outcome model primarily tries its best to give the customers a perspective of what your future costs are going to be, not just from a financial perspective, but also from a day-to-day perspective, as well as being predictable on what would be the overall spend. While doing that, it does not lock you down in terms of a couple of years of reserved commitments of how much you would consume. We start with SAP best practices around a minimalistic approach to the environment. Our recommended approach is to start with a three-tier environment with DR, whether it is ECC on HANA, whether it is S/4HANA, or any other SAP product. Dev QA prod with a DR is our recommended approach. And then on demand, our cloud offerings can spun up systems for a temporary period as per the customer needs and requirements, whether it is for a particular project, whether it is for a particular upgrade, etc. And you don't need to invest into infrastructure for a couple of years just because you wanted to do an upgrade project. I've had customers who went live 2 years back. They wanted to do a particular pilot for a particular solution as well as upgrade their database or application to the next version. And they took a fourth QA2 tier or QA tier from us for a temporary period of 2 or 3 months, did the project, tested the project, rolled out the functionality to the production system, and then spun out or terminated the QA2 system. And hence they paid for it as well for that temporary period, rather than keeping that infrastructure forever and maintaining it and also paying for it on an ongoing basis. The other aspect here is, from a single outcome model, is more around the financial piece of it, which is where our model allows us and allows you to use and leverage the cost parameters of not just the maintenance that you might be paying today for SAP software, but also to blend in these predictable/unpredictable maintenance or operational costs, as well as the infrastructure surprises that come along the way. Our contracts going forward allow customers to ramp not just infrastructure, but also software. So if you're starting an S4 journey in year 2 or year 3, we can start with ECC or a suite on HANA deployment with the ancillary products and roll into the contract the S/4HANA roadmap as you deem the pace at which you would like to adopt the solution. Similarly, if you're starting with an older version of a BW or BPC or any other SAP solution, we can ramp it into the future version that you foresee as being the roadmap of what your business demands or your business might demand. But then from an IT perspective, you don't have to go knock the door to get additional budgets approved for those mini projects or mini upgrades or mini solution versions that you might require. Last but not the least, you overall get a SLA across the stack. And that is the third, and in my opinion, the most important objective for IT teams. SAP does not give you SLA of our cloud solutions for infrastructure only or for keeping the system available via a human being available to respond to a request. When SAP commits an SLA for a managed cloud solution, for every SAP software, including S4, our SLA is for the entire stack that includes infrastructure, database, as well as the application layer. There is no other provider today that can give you that level of SLA because in the mix comes the SAP support piece, which is where SAP is accountable today any which way if you are an on-prem customer for SAP software. So overall, the outcome is least risk for our customers, most reliability for the environment, scalability and flexibility and agility in case the environment needs to grow in size due to any M&A activity, due to any project activity, due to any operations and other business activity, etc. And last but not the least, to give you the best-in-class reference architecture, minimalist deployment at the start, and scalable in the future as per the demands with the SLA for not just the infrastructure, but for the entire application stack for system being up and running. And hence you get a single hand to shake or a single back to pack when it comes to all support, DB, operations, and environmental topics. Moving on, this is where I get into a little bit of a perspective of IT, right? So yes, all of us want to go to cloud. All of us want to be with a hyperscaler of choice and leverage the elastic consumption model that comes with the hyperscalers. We want the best-in-class support. I should be able to call a person if I need help, if I have a problem. and our cloud offerings do give you dedicated engagement lead, technical leads, etc. You will have their phone numbers, you will have their emails, and if they are outside the 8-hour window, you will have a secondary contact to reach out to in case an issue arises in a global deployment model. We do have multiple flavors of our cloud offerings that have different requirements by different organizations around security, around protocols, around certifications, etc. But also, if you have any particular requirements around U.S. citizens, we have a flavor that offers FedRAMP, HIPAA, ITAR, or any other government regulations or military regulations too. Allison used one of those flavors to leverage U.S. citizens only for their environment because they had secure data that had to stay within the country, etc. And hence, our offering is very holistic. It covers all the geographies in the world, Russia, India, China, any other country. Again, we can cover those requirements and certifications, or we can follow the standard approach of follow the sun model with global support organizations, being attentive and monitoring the environment 24/7, 365 days a year. The other two comments here, some customers have concerns that this might result into the IT team losing control, and that is completely not the intent. SAP wants to take over the tactical tasks of managing, maintaining, and operating the environment, whereas the strategic tasks of what the business needs are, how the IT should deliver and meet the business needs, what the solution roadmap should be, how the deployment roadmap should be, is what stays with IT of the customer itself, while SAP does those tactical tasks, as I said. Overall, from a customer and IT management perspective, you have one of the strongest partners. You bought the SAP software, so you trust SAP as a brand. You trust SAP as a core solution and capabilities. Now it's time to get into the next stage of leveraging SAP for managed services and also depend on SAP to help you with the hyperscaler engagement, help you with the SI engagement when it comes to reducing your risk and bringing the stability of the environment in control with the best-in-class support from SAP. On the financial side, the traditional models had a CapEx approach to it where a customer would buy SAP applications, SAP databases, and infrastructure either for hosting purposes and purchase the infrastructure and depreciate it over X number of years and pay annual maintenance on both infrastructure and software. But then this would result into multiple providers, an AMS provider, an infrastructure support provider, as well as SAP support, etc. And there could be many more depending on which software was implemented, deployed, and is being managed by which AMS provider. And hence, overall, the model or the setup becomes complicated. Whereas with SAP, you could choose two paths. One could be the partial subscription path, where your cloud contracts, of course, have infrastructure from a hyperscaler of choice. SAP is accountable and responsible to do all the basis, all the operational tasks on top of that infrastructure. We are responsible for upgrades. We are responsible for day-to-day patching. We are responsible for the stack SLA to ensure the application is accessible by the end users. And if it is not, then we are in the violation of our SLA. But then you can also say, I would like to fold in everything, not just application and or database, but both. And this is where, again, we give you the flexibility to pick and choose the hyperscaler you want, to pick and choose the amount and the quantities of software you want today, ramp the quantities of both software and infrastructure into a 5-year contract, let's say, as an example, and pay for all of this in an OpEx model quarterly or annually as you would like. And this is one single SAP-only contract that bundles the infrastructure from hyperscaler of choice. You can convert your maintenance dollars into this cost. So at a logical point when you go live on a cloud environment, we would terminate your maintenance, and that expense, that cash flow, would turn into the OpEx of cloud, and hence you don't have to pay your maintenance bill at the start of the year or on a quarterly basis, etc. In addition to that, this is your only way to right-size your SAP license model If you have oversubscribed users, if you have oversubscribed on any products that you've decided not to use anymore, this model also lets you optimize that and convert or eliminate that unwanted shelfware into dollars that work towards the cloud subscription model rather than paying for it on a continuous way. I've already mentioned about the hyperscalers and the agility that comes with it. We are fully transparent in terms of the amount of infra from a hyperscaler that goes in the contract and how it can be increased in future on demand for a temporary or for an entire remaining period of a contract. And overall in this approach, you future-proof your software roadmap, bring in S4 and other solutions on a need basis, on demand basis, and on the adoption roadmap basis, which will help you build over time. Moving on, one question that I get asked very, very frequently is why shouldn't we go to a hyperscaler directly? We have a very strong IT team. We have an IT team that is very much interested and aligned towards one hyperscaler over another. And why would we come to SAP for this? Because our IT team can then work with that hyperscaler for not just SAP, but also for all our non-SAP landscape. It's the best question that anybody can ask in this conversation. And my simple answer to that situation is, would you want to bring the best-in-class experts for the software to manage and operate your environment, or would you want to break it into multiple providers and deal with all the complexity and risks that come with it? Because then there'll be finger pointing on, oh no, this is not a hardware issue, this is more of a software deployment issue, this is a software version issue, you don't have patch A or patch 2 or patch 5 applied to the environment. And this is where your functional app support is not something that hyperscalers would be willing to cover. We will have to bring in a partner, which is not a bad approach, but it's just that it has multiple players in the mix and hence adds to not just IT operational complexity, but also commercial model complexity from a contractual perspective. And then comes the AMS providers for the database and management of the applications, etc. Hyperscalers per se on the infrastructure commitments and consumption, etc. And then many other aspects become the responsibility of IT, DR being one, backup being another, OS maintenance being third, overall architectural roadmap being fourth, etc., etc. And hence, this results into multiple players being in the mix, no single point of accountability, SIs being taking over certain pieces of the puzzle, but then hyperscalers keeping the other, AMS provider getting the third, and hence from an IT decision maker perspective or from a CXO perspective, you have the highest risk because you have to then maneuver through all these and ensure system stability. Whereas in our SAP Managed Cloud contracts, you have a single contract, single SLA. We fold in the hyperscaler environments with the associated RAM. We manage the environment. We are responsible for upgrades, patches, etc. The very strong SAP support organization with our Mission Control Center is accountable 24/7 to manage, operate, and patch, as well as address any surprises that come during the off hours, etc. So overall, we feel this is one great choice for customers that covers all the flavors of various security certification requirements, gives you the flexibility, scalability that many customers are demanding right now, gives you an ability to eliminate shelfware, convert your maintenance dollars into cloud consumption, cloud OpEx model, and overall allows you to get S4 or any other future SAP software into the environment from day one or fold it into a rammed environment from any time in the contract. With that, I'm already seeing some questions coming on the chat board. I really appreciate it. Please do send your questions. I will summarize the questions at the end of this call for all of you. If you're not able to answer those questions, we will also get back to you one-on-one on any of the questions that get unanswered. With this, I would like to pass this on to the Allison team. As Rocky mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, we have Eddie, who is the Managing Director of IT at Allison. We have Brendan, the Enterprise Architect from Allison. as well as we have our friends from Gyansys, Dave Biggett, the Managing Director, and Praveen, who was deeply involved in the Gyansys migration project, to talk to you about their journey. With that, Eddie, can I please pass it on to you, and if you could please introduce yourself. Thank you so much, Eddie.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to everyone for the time this morning to hear about the Allison journey that we've taken on so far. My name's Eddie Kendrick. I'm the Managing Director over IT Architecture and Operations at Allison Transmission. If you're not familiar with Allison, we're the largest manufacturer of fully automatic transmissions. We're over a 100-year-old manufacturing company. We're headquartered out of Indianapolis, Indiana. We are a global company. We have presence in over 80 countries with regional headquarters based out of the Netherlands, China, and Brazil. We also have manufacturing locations in the U.S., Hungary, and India. We serve various applications in the commercial vehicle space. On highway, that includes distribution, refuse, construction, fire, emergency, so on and so forth. We also serve buses, motor homes, off-highway, that includes applications within energy, mining, and construction. And we also have defense vehicles that we support, both wheeled and tracked. Some of the drivers for us as an organization and company, several years back, we were facing a large amount of technical debt that we knew we had to address in the upcoming years. And this technical debt, was more than just one layer. This included Oracle, NetWeaver Stack, Red Hat, and even the hardware that we were currently running on-premise at the time. We also had some underlying concerns around technical support, not only for just legacy support of our environment, but also into the future as we think about the skills necessary to support HANA as a new database technology and the eventual move to S4. The reality is, Allison, we're not in the business of managing data centers. That's not at the core of what we do or what we want to do. And so that was something we were facing. And we also knew that we had this looming date. It's changed a little bit, in regards to the migration to S4. We also had some limited business capacity from the various functions to time that migration out appropriately. As I mentioned, we are a 100-year-old manufacturing company, but in 2019, we were faced with our first merger and acquisition activity, which added a whole new business demand that we were not accustomed to managing, that we had to quickly adapt to. When it comes to the SAP Managed Cloud, the primary things we looked at that were value drivers was around the flexibility and the scalability of the cloud offering. 5 or 6 years ago, I wouldn't have thought we would have been this heavily invested in the cloud just based off some legacy ways of thinking, but we've transformed that thinking and have embraced cloud when it's right for applications for us as an enterprise. That flexibility and scalability was around licensing the applications itself and the infrastructure that go along with it. We also were looking at to have mature HANA experience that came along with that offering. And then we also had, very important to us, was the ability to leverage a hyperscaler that supported Allison's business needs and, even more importantly, our compliance requirements in the market segments that we're going after. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brandon Rowley. He is the program architect at Allison to get into some of the details about our journey that we've undertaken.
Hello, guys. Thanks for joining, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Brandon Rowley. I'm the SAP program architect here at Allison. Mainly led the transformation to cloud and HANA that we started beginning of 2019, I would say. Going down this road, but some of the things we were really looking for and looking at the managed cloud service offering was, as Eddie alluded to, kind of that mature HANA skill set and kind of managing the infrastructure behind it. We looked at a bunch of different options. TDI. We looked at HANA certified appliances. And obviously, hyperscalers in the cloud, the cost of that hardware, bringing that on-prem, having the skill set to be able to configure that, since HANA is such a unique animal in that regard, we kind of looked at kind of the managed cloud offering as a win for us because it took that off of our plate as something that we have to know and understand. We didn't want to do a whole lot of trial by error and get that going. So we wanted a prepackaged, pre-delivered package that would provide everything that we needed. SAP provided the recommendations, the security around what we needed from an ITAR standpoint. So they really brought all that for us, and we negotiated it and worked through the contract and managed to right-size our licensing. I think that was a very important factor with us. We've had SAP for over 20 years, so obviously we've had applications in the stack that we were trying to move off of and move away from into more modern offerings, right? And then being able to terminate that contract and be able to right-size our licensing and make sure that we have the licensing that we want for the future, and being able to pull forward some licensing that we need out, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But just really, this slide kind of talks about what we went with. We went with kind of the full offering. We have, as mentioned, we're in Azure Cloud. We chose Azure because we have familiar comfort with them. We've used them in the past with our own tenant. So we were more familiar with what they had and kind of what the offering was there. So we went with that route. But we did use a Cloud because we are an ITAR compliant organization. But we did, like I said, the full offering. So all of our SAP licensing, all the OS licensing, all the DB licensing, all run through SAP today. The benefit of that is, as Rajiv was mentioning, is really when we need something, we only have one person that we have to go to bring all of that together. We're not over here going, oh, we want to implement GRC. Okay, well, what infrastructure do we need to buy? How much is that going to cost? We need to go ask CDW for that. We need to go ask our current provider for infrastructure, how they can set that up, how long that's going to take. We just go to SAP, and they come back, give us that timing, give us that pricing, and we just move forward from there. And that does take a lot of load off of the management of your IT systems as a whole, especially around SAP, since it's such a big and it's such a critical application in your environment. You don't really want to miss there, right? So we've seen a lot of benefit from that aspect of it. So just kind of a little bit about what Allison's going through as a whole. We have had a long road to try to get to S4. We're doing it very incrementally. This was kind of the first big rock to move. We did Suite on HANA in Azure Cloud. We didn't feel the business was quite ready for the S4 transformation. We didn't want to try to tackle a data center migration to cloud, a HANA migration, and an S4 transformation on top of that, especially with a 20-year-old system. We wanted to be able to knock out all the technical stuff early so that we could really focus on that SAP transformation for S4. So this was these are the steps that we're taking to get there. We did an assessment a couple years ago with Ganses, talk through what would be necessary for S4, and then we kind of took that and made some plans around that. Some of the other things that we really wanted to accomplish was getting our data down to a manageable level, since we'd never really done archiving as a practice. We'd had archiving here and there, but we wanted to get that down for obviously fitting into a HANA landscape and kind of reducing costs for that HANA migration and reducing time for the actual downtime migration here. So like I said, the first things we did was kind of that assessment. We looked at what it would take for us to get there, where our transformation opportunities were within the S4 landscape, and then kind of deciding what was necessary, and where that could play, and before making our decision on whether or not we wanted to go straight to S4 or do the Suite on HANA. As mentioned, we did this SAP archiving prior to our move, so this was everything kind of trying to get us in the right spot to make the actual migration work. There was some cleanup to do, obviously. So like I said, we've had 20 years of SAP data. We wanted to knock out a lot of that, try to speed up the actual migration, and then also lower the cost of the HANA infrastructure. Also, we did kind of a unique thing. We actually did a lot of the code remediation within our environment prior to doing the migration. So we did a good assessment on what kind of the low-risk changes that we could make, tried to knock that out as much as possible. I mean, that was really the goal, was let's knock out as much as we can before we even start trying to make this move, just to reduce complexity, reduce the time it takes to deliver a final product. With our licensing structure for HANA, we did a runtime license. For the most part, we did a runtime license. So we had some restrictions on what we could do from a direct DB query read. So you'll see SAP Cloud Platform was something that we kind of went with early on to remediate some of the direct DB reads that we had previously. So we implemented SAP Cloud Platform, and then we did a direct DB interface rewrite project to move those over to OData services so that we could have that running through a proper SAP application and kind of be in compliance there. We were also managing a massive Ariba implementation during this whole migration, so that we added some complexity to ourselves there. But I think we managed that well, and everything went well with that, and we're going live. And kind of with the GRC implementation, as I mentioned earlier, within one of the benefits of the full subscription would be the flexibility on the licensing. When we were negotiating with SAP about licensing for this move, we had kind of a staggered licensing approach where we had some things that we were tackling in 2020, so our licensing kicked in then for certain applications, and then some kicked in at later dates when we felt like we were going to be ready for that. We had that written down, we were good to go, but then we kind of had some demands to push our access control implementation forward. So really working with SAP made that a lot easier to get that move forward, because it was already a cost that we had. We already knew what that was going to look like. We already knew what the infrastructure behind that was going to be, because that was already planned out in kind of that phased approach that we had clarified in the contract talks. So it was really easy to do. It was just kind of, hey, we need to move this up. Let's just move that whole cost for that implementation up. So there was a lot of flexibility there, and it was really easy to do, and really nice to really only have to go to one person to go and get that done. So we saw a very quick turnaround on getting that up and running, and we were really actually able to go live in access control probably 3-4 months after we even made that decision. So there wasn't a whole lot of time to deliver there. We pretty much we're moving rather quickly on that. So kind of talk about what we had before we made the switch. Is we were an on-prem ECC, BW, QIM, SRM, Soulman. I think I'm missing one, but neither here nor there. We were all Oracle. On-prem, we had some massive database clusters that we were managing, controlling, which had some complexities around it, because if you didn't have the original people that set up the cluster, you had new providers come in. They have to figure out how to make that work. Failover capabilities were there, but never really tested, and so we felt more comfortable moving to kind of the cloud and making sure the HADR capabilities were there, and we really had true cross-geographic redundancy and replication. One of the major benefits of going to a hyperscaler would be the capabilities in that space. Azure site recovery, things like that, where you can just VM transfer a load over the entire width of the country, right? So one of the big benefits that we were seeing from going cloud here. But going back to here, so just a little bit of what we had prior to this, and then as mentioned, we were trying to get rid of some of our existing applications like SRM and our enterprise portal. So being able to right-size that license and terminate those contracts to more applications that we wanted to use in the future. And so this is where we are today. We have a full subscription, but we didn't keep everything. We didn't move absolutely everything to the cloud. We obviously played that by ear and what made sense for each area. For instance, our content servers that we use for our PLM, we kept on-prem mainly because of just how our business process works there and how the data is received from the end customer. We wanted to reduce the hops there. So what we ended up doing was moving ECC, BW, QIM, and Solman to the cloud. We did the GRC implementation directly in the cloud, and moving ECC and BW and Solman to HANA while keeping some of these things on-prem like Vertex, Content Server, Loftware, and moved Redwood onto prem. So again, you kind of have flexibility in what you want to do there. Just because you sign a cloud offering with SAP doesn't mean that you have to move everything SAP to the cloud. There's flexibility on there and what you want to do. It goes case by case. As you can see, we kept some of our SAP stuff on-prem. Again, this is kind of the scope of everything that we moved over there. We did also a NetWeaver stack upgrade while we were making the migration as well, but you see everything was pretty much Oracle-based except for QIM, and we moved everything HANA, ASE. The decision between HANA and ASE was really based around what benefit you would see out of using a HANA database or not for that application. PO QIM, we decided to just use ASE because we didn't see the great benefit of putting that on a HANA infrastructure. So just a little bit about our timeline. We certainly did our due diligence when we were doing this, and I think this is an important piece to know if you're thinking about making this move. Would be practice on your migrations. We did, I think, a total of 8 migrations prior to go live, and it was really just to perfect the craft and make sure that we could really hit the timeline and the downtime that we wanted to do. So some of the steps that obviously we had to take were code remediation. Once we actually got up there, we still had code that we needed to remediate that was too risky to remediate in our live environment. So we had cycles of that going on in Sandbox while we were also trying to do regression testing at the same time. And again, the prep work was really just to reduce that code remediation cycle here, so we weren't using that as a bottleneck moving forward. And so, obviously, test and practice, that's really what it comes down to. Make sure that you have good testing. Make sure that you have that cutover plan finalized and kind of set in stone before you do that live production cutover. So as you can see, it was a lengthy project, but it went really well for us. We were up and successful and haven't had any major issues since we went live June 15th. So some of the value that we're seeing from the cloud is we're no longer responsible for managing the multiple SAP systems in HANA. We didn't have any HANA experience on site when we started this. So the decision to try to build that up or just go with people who built the system or built the application, it made sense for us just to get that experience at the front end instead of trying to build that up through education and trial. And so, again, I can't stress at that point enough. It's hard enough to try to manage HANA infrastructures and where you want to and how you want to work within the HANA infrastructure, and let alone combining that with managing a hyperscaler and then also managing a separate support group. There's a lot of complexity there, and your basis guy isn't going to be an expert in Azure Cloud computing. He might be, I don't know, but I'm just saying in general, not experts in Azure Cloud computing, not experts in Azure offerings, or any hyperscaler for that matter. So really having that single bag to pack is a very, very nice offering, and a very easy on the IT management team as a whole. So yeah, getting that mix of knowledge between the hyperscaler skills and the HANA and the SAP management as a whole is a very, very valuable aspect to the offering. And again, and kind of what, as Rajiv mentioned earlier, when you talk about losing control of the IT or losing control of the application and the strategy, that certainly has not been the case for us. It's actually allowed us to focus more time on that than less, because we're not spending our time focusing on upgrades, focused on when is our hardware going to be out of support, when do we do patching. We're not managing any of that. Certainly we're working with them on scheduling that to make sure it's not conflicting with anything else we're going on, but we're not the ones scripting out how this is going to look. We're not the ones going and chasing down those dates. This is all being managed on the SAP side, and they're working with us to make sure that it fits within our timeline, and then if it doesn't, we're working through how we want to manage that and move forward. So again, I don't feel like we've lost any control. I feel like I can focus more of my time on the things that matter. I don't want to say upgrading doesn't matter, but the things that matter towards the business, and building a strategic direction for Allison as a whole. So as far as losing IT control, I definitely don't feel like that should be a concern at all. If anything, it should give you more control over the strategy and more time to focus on that. Another value that we're obviously getting is we wanted to be able to utilize some of the next-gen platforms that HANA provides us, and making this move opens up some of those boxes for us, where to try to build some enthusiasm towards an S4 implementation. You can utilize some of the capabilities of HANA to say, hey, if you like it in Suite on HANA, you'll love it in S4. So trying to build organic enthusiasm from the business to want to make that transformation and dedicate a lot of time to getting that done. Again, 20 years of SAP, we have a lot of legacy processes, a lot of legacy data. We want to make sure when we do S4, we're doing what makes sense for the business, and we're actually taking a leap forward and streamlining processes and optimizing where we can. So that's why we kind of took it this phased approach. We didn't go jump straight into S4 because we really wanted to do our due diligence on ensuring that we could reach our transformational opportunities that we wanted to hit. So obviously you're going to have challenges with these big data center moves. The biggest one that I lost sleep over was, how do we manage interfaces? How do we manage integrations? We have 200 plus integrations within SAP, some internal, some external. So how are we managing that? We probably spent most of our planning around how we're going to do that. So we have a couple different ways that we manage that. One was through using kind of the cloud platform where we could. Some of it was using Apache Reverse Proxy. We used a lot of DNS changing. The bulk of it was done through DNS switching and kind of replicating host names on the cloud as you did on-prem, but then obviously different IPs and things like that. But we can go into that later. The other thing that we have, we actually have print capabilities at some of our distributors, so we had to work with them to make sure that that they were still able to perform their duties for Allison. So going through a lot of the networking and SAP tunnels and things like that to make sure that they were still able to perform their work. So integrations was a huge piece. Always going to be scary. You don't have a great way of testing. You can test in QA, but it's still, it's always going to be always a little bit scary when you're making that change in prod. So yeah, just if you're going to make the move, make sure you do your due diligence on interface and integration work, and making sure that you have that planned out and understanding all of your needs there. So what made this successful for us, was working, just the contract flexibility, the flexibility of the solution as a whole, and kind of being able to work with one team to manage that whole setup on the Azure side. We allowed us to focus our project on the actual migration efforts and not, building a new environment in the cloud. Yeah, we had some work around connecting that through express routes and MPLS and things like that, but that was relatively quick and easy to do. In fact, we probably did it 4 or 5 times within a matter of a month, just kind of changing things up and then seeing what worked best for Allison. Some other things that we did, that was obviously we talked about the archiving and the code cleanup prior to the migration, kind of speed up the project and reduce that timeline, reduce the downtime needed for the actual performance of the migration. Getting regression testing done early in your sandbox. I went back and forth on whether or not I wanted to have a huge sandbox migration cycle, but I think it ended up being for the best. We were able to keep some parallel streams going while we were doing a lot of the regression testing. While we were doing regression testing, we did the whole dev migration, and so we got some things out of the way while that was going on to again kind of squeeze that timeline without impacting quality. So we did a good job at there. We spent a lot of time talking about testing. We asked our business to do a lot of work around updating their test scripts, making sure that they had coverage on every impacted scenario. Very key, obviously, and I know that's an obvious one, but keeping your scripts up to date is not something that pretty much everywhere I've been has been a struggle. So making sure that's done and using that opportunity to build that up and kind of lay that framework for possibly future from testing and future upgrades and things like that it's a good opportunity to get that updated and get that in a proper spot. So I think we accomplished that pretty well. Again, back to the coordination. The SAP Managed Cloud team was involved in the daily calls with us, with the project team and ATI to make sure that everybody was on the same page with what was going on. And they were really critical in fixing some of the issues that we had. I mean, nothing goes perfect. We had some Azure events that caused some failovers. They did a good job addressing that, did a good job explaining what happened and kind of what to expect in the future if something like this were to happen in a live environment, and coming up with recommendations on how to expedite that back getting that system back up and running. So they were there, they were involved, provided the recommendations that we needed, and really did a good job in getting the environment stood up for us. Really, once the bridge was built there, we were ready to roll. And we really didn't see a lot of issues with any of our migrations, except for, of course, the one right before prod. We had some issues where we needed to do some patching, but we worked together as a team and we got that done. Wasn't really any finger pointing or anything like that. It was everybody together and solving the problem. So that was it was really awesome to see that, honestly. Yeah, the network switching and things like that. Those were all very critical in the success for getting that done, and really just well coordinated across all of our partners. So we have emphasis for our infrastructure, getting them aligned from a networking standpoint, and just making sure that you kind of have all hands on deck and everybody's aware of what's going on and kind of the brevity of the situation. So some of the lessons learned, and we talked about this a little bit, custom code, obviously something that you have to think about when you move into HANA. All your custom code isn't going to work, so you got to run your analysis, plan that project out for remediating that. You can do that after you migrate, but I would recommend trying to get as much out of the way as you can. Integrations, moving 5 systems at a time to the cloud, figuring out what that downtime looks like and how you want to approach that, and things like that. So all the things that I think we did a pretty good job of accounting for up front, but certainly the things that we wanted, we think you should focus on if you're going to make this move. All right, with that, I'll hand it over to the Gantis team to kind of talk through their offerings here and what they can provide for you.
Great. Thanks, Brandon. Hey, this is Dave. We've got a few more minutes here, so we want to go ahead and talk through what you just heard from Brandon was, their journey that specifically, they chose to do based on their business value and benefits that they're trying to achieve. What we want to do is talk a little bit more generically about each of you have a decision to make about what your journey should look like. So we want to talk through, what are some of those decisions? What are the processes that you should be going through in order to go ahead and make that decision? So with that, I just want to touch a little bit on who Gantis is. You can see here about a lot of the statistics about who Gantis is, but for the most part, we are a global mid-tier system implementation. All of our growth over the last 15 years has been through organic growth. And that comes from working with customers like Allison that we work closely with on projects and application development support, and we grow to become their trusted advisor. And we think it's important to make sure that we do projects very well, and then prove ourselves to be able to become a service provider for them long term. You can see a lot of the projects here we do globally here in the U.S. as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. We've been doing a lot of growth in the areas of manufacturing because of the Midwest presence we have, but also a lot in the life sciences and the CPG group as well. So you can see a lot of our customers, are listed there in the size of our group. We are a privately held company, so we don't have the pressures that some of the other organizations have to deliver certain financial pressures on a quarterly basis. So we do target, as you can see from the customer base there, we target a lot of customers in the $500 million to $10 billion range. And that's where we find our sweet spot because being that mid-tier global, so we have the ability to support global operations with our 3 delivery centers throughout the world. We have some focus areas that are listed up on the screen, but not only are these focus areas, we also have packages that support these areas like Ariba, the e-commerce, and the IBP. And it's not the fact that there's, just a focus area, like I said, these packages, but we'll have a package if you're interested in something like inventory optimization, right? We can have a specific project associated with that. Maybe it's sales and operations planning like some of our customers. We've done some good work for them and improved their business processes in those areas. So we have these packages that we can offer you to get you in the door on these capabilities. And some of them start as low as like $50,000. Obviously, they can go higher depending on your scope of what you want to deliver. A little bit about our S4 practice area. In addition to what you see on the screen there, we also have done about 25 assessments, similar to what Brandon mentioned. They worked with us on the assessment of what is their specific roadmap. We've worked with other customers to come up with what their roadmap should look like as well. You can see some of the customers that we've worked with down there. Some of those are brownfield migrations, greenfield migrations, as well as some assessments. So we feel very proud about having over 500 consultants that have been working on S4 projects already. And so we have the ability to helpfully support where you're trying to go with your journey. One of the things that we do that I've been watching some of the questions coming in is, some people are trying to come up with a business case for their journey, right? How do we prove the fact that we can provide business value here, not just a pure technical upgrade because it has to be done? So based on that, we work and leverage with some of the SAP tools, and we do a move-in motion, and we expand on that to be able to understand what your inputs are, like some business drivers, what's your size of your company, right? But that can be really easily handled by running some of the SAP tools like the BSRs. We go through that analysis. We look at the custom code. What has to happen in the custom code? I know there's some questions about, what considerations we have to do with custom code, right? So Praveen's going to talk a little bit more about that in the next coming slides. So we take all that input, and then we come out with an ROI and be able to determine what we think that best practice implementation might be for you, what that best roadmap is, and what could be those cost savings, right? What kind of cost savings can you get from a transformational type activity when it comes to like finance or the supply chain area? So you definitely get some value associated from doing those activities. And we focus on, the two things that we've talked about so far with Allison has been, right, moving to the HANA database in addition to the cloud migration, right? That's really kind of two separate projects that we combine together, right? You could also go take that even a little bit further and say, how about we do an S4 migration as well as moving to HANA as well as moving to the cloud? So we have to consider all those things when we're coming up with that plan. But some of the things on the screen you can see, about, and that Brandon talked about, how do you optimize some of those capabilities by doing the archiving that you're looking for? What kind of business transformation should we be targeting? Allison chose not to do that, but we have the ability during our best practice workshops to identify where are possible opportunities for improvements. How can we take advantage of the new capabilities that SAP is delivering? And so what we do during our best practices workshops is it's not only about us understanding what the gaps are, it's also about educating your team. Your team needs to start understanding what the S4 capabilities are and how we can go ahead and implement and leverage that for your environment. And then the next thing is that Praveen is going to talk about is the SAP landscape assessment, right? So what are all the things that Brandon and the Allison team had to go through, and what were some of their options that we can go ahead and leverage and implement? And that comes out with those two combined, you come out with that implementation roadmap to figure out something specifically for you. So we've run best practices, as you can see on the screen here. But what I found when I've been running these workshops is that it's very critical to have your key process areas and your key IT resources engaged with these discussions. That way they're understanding how it's going to work. They can start envisioning how the new your company is going to operate, leveraging the SAP functionality that's there. And we run these workshops, in a fashion such that, we're only going to take a portion of your day. We know that everybody still has their full-time job. So we have to run these in 2-hour increments or 4 hours a day, whatever, your team can handle, such that we have the ability to have you continue to run the business, but yet you get understandings, you get to be able to see how the system works, because we'll actually stand up an environment. We'll give you access to our environment. We'll probably set up some specific materials so that you can start processing it, utilizing your terms, but you'll be able to see how that SAP best practice operation works. So that's one of the key things as part of this journey in trying to determine what that transformation is going to look like. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Praveen to lead through the landscape assessment.
Thank you, Dave. This is Praveen. So here I will talk about the landscape assessment. So each landscape will be unique, and what we try to do is that to analyze the assessment and to find the opportunity to improve, reduce the complexity, and do some of the work upfront, so that you don't need to burden your overall project cycle. So our assessment, looks into a different direction. It looks into a database size. Can we reduce the database size and optimize the overall TCU, or can we look into the custom code and see that some of the things we can remediate early. So if you'll see one of the example at ATI where we have around done 30 to 40% of the code we remediated even just before the project, which has definitely reduced the timeline of this code remediation and then overall the timeline of the project. Our assessment looks for the database, then also the consideration for the cloud migration, because when you do the cloud migration, you need to see different factors apart of that what you do for S4HANA. So we identify those items, that how that network switch should happen, how the downtime will be impacted if you are moving to the cloud. So we consider all those things in our landscape assessment. So with the landscape assessment, the other thing which we build, right, we onboard the business users by leveraging or educating them with the S4HANA capabilities. We do the landscape assessment and find out all the simplifications we can do and all the complexity we can reduce there. And combining it together, we come up with a plan where we see that how much transformation is required. If we see that the transformations are less and you want to execute the project on a shorter timeline, it will more point towards the greenfield project to the brownfield project. But at the same time, there are lots of transformations are required, and you are ready to do the strategic investment on that. We create a roadmap based on that, and which is visually very similar what we built for the ATI if you have seen. So apart of that overall the code remediation and all other things, there are several other factors we need to look into, which will be Fury rollout, which is sometimes becomes challenging, because if your users are already onboarded on they work on a S4 system or SAP system, they may be aware of lots of UIs. So we need to see that how we can target that limited number of Furies rollout so that we can get the better outcome from the Fury, but at the same time not increasing the complexity of the learning curve for the business users. And we also include the analytics as well as the master data conversion assessment, where we tell exactly what kind of corrections in the master data will be required, what effort will be required to make your data ready for the conversion of your system. So, and some of the elements like this all the 4 blocks are relevant for the greenfield and brownfield. So that's why I highlighted now which elements will be relevant for greenfield, which one will be relevant for brownfield. If I'll see overall the project cycle, I will not go to talk about everything, but some of the things which you'll see here is has a color of blue here, where you'll see that how we can evaluate your system to target for a cloud migration. What kind of data pipe will be required? You need to set up a direct connect or express route. What network bandwidth will be required? What you need to do optimize your overall downtime, how you can do that. So we consider all those factors for the assessment. And but at the end, one of the most important thing which I will talk about is the accelerator, because we use all the wonderful SAP tools to evaluate the system, but at the same time we build a code remediator tool which gives you all the remediation capabilities at one place. So you don't need to go and change all the individual programs one by one. From the same tool you can do the analysis, you can do the remediation, and at the last you can do the auditing of the tool, auditing of all the correction from the one place, and that's kind of reduce the SAP code remediation by a good amount. So yeah, I will hand over it to Dave now.
Yeah, so as you can see, from a call to action perspective, if somebody is interested, right, where you want to start, right, one of the steps that you could be taking is let's look at some of these best practices workshop. What are improvements? What transformational type activities do you want to do? You also want to be developing that implementation roadmap as it associates with the business processes as well as the infrastructure, and as Praveen said, the code debt. One other thing you might want to do is also take a look at the analytics assessment. For the most part, the analytics have greatly increased in the S4 solution. So you might want to look at the way you're currently doing it. Maybe the future way of doing it might be a little bit more proactive for yourselves. And then you start looking at the pre-projects. As Allison started, right, they started doing some activities ahead of time to ensure that the data migration to the HANA environment was very successful. So you want to set those in place before you actually start churning the switch to either the HANA database and or the S4 solution. So with that, want to turn it back over to Rajiv to look at the SAP call for action.
Thank you very much, everyone. Great content, great information, very insightful. And I hope the audience also found this very helpful and insightful. We are doing our best to respond to all the Q&A on the chat. I will summarize some of them in a few seconds. I know you're about to be done out of time by a few minutes, but overall, the call to action from our perspective, this is generally a 4 to 6 weeks engagement. Of course, the time is on our side here today because most of our customers pay their annual maintenance at the start of the year, and if that's the case, then the 6 weeks engagement would come very timely for us to finalize everything in the next couple of weeks and get your maintenance payments deferred or scheduled according to the change in contract. So please act now if you are interested and if you found this valuable. It is worth your time. We will make sure that we don't take a lot of your bandwidth to do this exercise. We just need the executive sponsorship and a point of contact to work with us on current deployment plans, current software quantities being used, and future roadmap discussions. We can start with a high level and get into a deeper conversation as things unfold and whether there is value being perceived in terms of optimizing the SAP costs and overall TCO benefit to the customer. With most engagements we've done in the past, we have always seen a TCO benefit. So within the third or the fourth week, we will have a proposal to present to customers and their executives that clearly articulates not just the roadmap, but also the cost factors and how the current IT spend that you might be spending today on various players, software maintenance, infrastructure, hosting, managed services, etc., how that all comes together into the single contract, the assumptions we have made, because if any of those assumptions are incorrect, then the price might fluctuate. But overall, we present a value case with a supportive business case. Some customers also prefer to do two paths, go as is lift and shift vis-a-vis go S4. We can present both of them into this 3 to 4 week cycle and then do a evaluation from week 4 onwards to see if we need to do any course corrections and adjustments to get into a final executive presentation and a contract signature around that. So typically 6 weeks time window, we feel very confident we can do this faster if there is interest and commitment. And this is always worth an exercise, right? SAP is willing to invest into this exercise at no cost to a customer to get you a proposal, review the nuances with you, explain the overall TCO and ROI, and how the numbers work in scenarios like this. I will now post a poll on the screen. If you can please appreciate your feedback here and let us know if there is an interest so that we can follow up with you directly. I'll give you 30 seconds to respond to the survey so that we can move on to the Q&A and chat conversation next. Thank you. So quickly, using the next minute or two to summarize some questions that we received on the live chat. So I've seen questions of varied degrees. There were many, many questions. We've responded to some of them. We will respond to others as a follow-up. But at a very, very high level, some of the questions that I think we should address now in the forum so that everybody is aware. One of the questions was around, is there a separate contract with Azure and a separate contract with SAP? The answer is no. There is only one contract. That contract gets signed with SAP. The SAP contract includes software, it includes managed services, the technical basis and or functional basis support, day-to-day monitoring. It gives you single SLA for the system uptime and support across the application layer and the infrastructure and the basis layer. And it also includes, most importantly, it also includes Azure infra in the contract. So you do not go sign a separate contract with Azure. You sign one contract with SAP. Software, infrastructure, managed services are all bundled into it. The contract gives you flexibility to ramp software, to ramp infrastructure, as well as to include on-demand infrastructure in future, or you can do that as a change request when the time comes, and your monthly or quarterly invoicing will then accordingly go up or go down. One other question that was asked around was, hey, why the migration timeline was 9 months? Could it be shorter? Could it be longer? Again, this has many nuances and interdependencies involved. Of course, migration has the biggest item here, the size of the system itself. Many customers prefer to optimize and either do archiving or data cleaning as part of the process as a start. Many other customers prefer to get to S4 as a greenfield deployment, which can be quicker. But in a brownfield scenario, then you have interdependencies with the business to be able to, of course, dedicate their time, but then also review the S4 transformation and S4 functionality improvements that come with it. So generally, I have seen customers complete the migration process in 6 months as well. I've seen many other customers take longer because they have other priorities. There are upgrades needed. There's a NetWeaver stack upgrade needed, as we heard the Allison team now. So overall, migration timeline depends on many factors, and this is where SAP comes in. If there is interest in this exercise, we bring in our services teams, or we can work with the SI of choice to understand the interdependencies and give you an estimate of how long the project will take, and then align it with your business priorities, because many manufacturing and financial services customers, or for that matter, even retail customers, have seasonal requirements on when the system can cut over and a go-live can happen, etc. I'll do one more question, and then we will address others. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We were asked on the flavors of the subscription model with various offerings. Just to re-emphasize, we have a possibility to do a full subscription model where all the software, all the database licenses are bundled with an Azure or AWS or Google infra, or alternatively, we can do it partially depending on customer requirements. If you're using the database licenses for many other applications that do not go to cloud, we can make it a partial subscription model and keep some database licenses for on-prem deployments and use others for the cloud deployment. Again, full flexibility on SAP's part here to work with you on the appropriate roadmap. And on the model per se, with respect to how this works on the flavors, so we have, of course, a standard flavor that follows the Sun model, 24/7 support by SAP employees across the globe, and these employees then are supporting based on the mission control situations that occur, and or any tactical activities, day-to-day batch jobs or day-to-day patches or operations that you might have requested, etc. There are specific flavors from a security and compliance perspective. If you have any special requirements, ITAR, HIPAA, FDA, FedRAMP, etc., being some of them. Of course, everything we do around here also complies with standard SOC 1, SOC 2, SSA 16, 17, and other certifications and requirements. But in the end, we have all the flavors, all inclusive, and SAP NS2 being one of the flavors that Allison used primarily covers the FedRAMP as well as the ITAR requirements, but then also offers U.S. citizens only that touch the system, and hence it becomes a highly secure and safe environment for certain customers who might have needs in those areas. But with that, we really appreciate here from SAP for all of you joining this session and staying with us. We look forward to work with you. We look forward to to contact you or follow up with you on any next steps if there is interest in this space. Thank you and have a great day. Bye for now.
Solving business challenges, powered by knowledge. Gansys.